What is going on, boys, and welcome back to the channel. We're at the shop after hours right now. I usually come and do all this shit on the weekends, but I'm here after work today because we have a lot to get done. Some things have kind of hit the fan with the Civic since the last video, so let's go over that quick. Our rad fan doesn't turn on with the OEM wiring. We took the thermostat wire, which is this one right here, jumped it, and they turn on right away, which leads me to believe that the thermo switch, the sensor inside the thermostat, is no bueno. So I got a new one of those, and since we have to drain the coolant to do that, I've also got a new engine coolant temperature sensor and the sensor that sends it to the OEM gauge. I figured there's 3 of them. If I'm doing one and draining the coolant, I might as well just do them all. So we have that to do. I gotta drain the coolant out of here. Next thing, when we were running the car and took it off jack stands, as I'm sure you can see by the cardboard, it's been leaking some oil. And that oil is coming from the bung that has been welded into the oil pan. So I have to drain the oil as well, rip off the oil pan and take it to my fabricator so he can either A, fix that one, but if you guys remember when we installed it, I decided to put the bung right where an oil pan bolt goes. So that is not great. I have my B16 pan that doesn't have a bung in it with another Russell steel bung that we can also use. So I might just go that route, but either way, that's the issues we're facing right now. Also, my Honda didn't want to connect to my laptop. Don't know why. Reached out to the company I bought it for and they said it probably needs new capacitors because they're 30 years old, blah, blah, blah. But it's been working ever since. So I think I'm just going to go ahead and leave that for now. But I don't want to bore you guys with ripping off this oil pan. I'm just going to take it off, drain the oil, and then we'll pick it back up once we start doing coolant stuff. Not great, boys. There is a lot of contamination in this pan. Lot of contamination in this pan I don't like seeing. I don't know how RTV got inside of it, but there's a lot of contamination. Not looking good. Okay guys, as you guys seen from the iPhone shot, there was quite a bit of contamination in the oil. Don't really know what's up with that. Not a huge fan of it, but what are you gonna do? We got the oil pan bung welded on the outside now. Fresh gasket, fresh jug of oil. Because the oil was contaminated, I'm not gonna reuse it. So got everything ready to go here. I'm gonna slap it back in and we should be met. All right guys, after spending way too much on oil and a fresh gasket, we are filling it up right now. I'm just waiting for it to settle in the pan so I can properly check the fluid. And then I'm gonna lower it, fire it up, see if it still leaks, and fingers crossed, boys, because like I spent way too much money on oil, and then to find there was contaminants in the pan, I'm glad it was off and was able to get cleaned out again. I cleaned up the pickup as much as I could. There's a little bit of stuff in there, but I mean, nothing else I can really do. We're just gonna have to send it. Let's lower this thing down and let's fire it up.
Okay, so far, we'll see.
Okay fellas, so far no leaks, thank the Lords above. Let's go. That's sick. I do want to take it for a quick test drive just up and down the alley, so I'm just going to put the fan wires back to hot wired with the fan switch we have run so I can take it for a quick test drive. And since it's getting warm now, the coolant and shit's gonna have to wait for another day, but that's okay. We'll just extend this video for more than one day. All right, so I've just put the fan to our hot wire switch. That's an inline fuse to positive and then to the switch, and the switch is grounded. So in theory, if I flip this, fan should turn on. Ready? Good to go. Switch still works. Let's grab the keys, fire this thing up. I don't have my Honda here to test, but it is flashing green, thank God. That was the longest crank it's done in the entirety of this car. What? Okay boys, let's get a drive. In the Civic, let's do one more check. Looking good. Get this thing backed out. Honda's down there, light's still green. Oh, the exhaust is gonna scrape. Watch this. Yikes. Go boys, Maiden voyage. Holy shit, fellas. We are driving. What's going on, boys? We are back for day 2 on this project. Last night we did the oil pan. We took it off, got it welded, got it cleaned, got a new gasket and fresh oil because when we pulled it there was a lot of contaminants in the oil. Then we reinstalled it all and it was a pain in the ass. You guys probably seen maybe a couple minutes of video of it, when in reality that was a whole span of doing all that stuff took 4 hours. And I am absolutely shot today. My neck hurts from holding it up under the car for so long to get that thing torqued right and make sure the gasket doesn't squish out on either side. But today, now that it's cooled off, you guys seen we took it for a drive yesterday. AFRs are way off. That was a terrible idea. I feel bad for the car after I did that. But today, now that it's all cold again, we have to go ahead, drain the coolant, take out the thermostat switch, the sending switch to the gauge, and the ECT switch. Replace all those, and while we're at it, I have a Gates Racing 170-degree thermostat, so hopefully it opens a bit colder. Then we can hook the fans up to the OEM wiring and see if they turn on by themselves. If they don't, I'm calling it there and we're wiring it into a relay. Last night I had it just on my hot wire switch. So without further ado, I don't want to be here for hours and hours again like the oil pan was. We are going to go ahead and start draining the coolant. And if you notice, the car is flipped around because I pulled it out of the shop yesterday and this thing's so low, and with the new traction bar I cannot pull it into my shop head on. It has to get backed in. I literally can't pull head on. The traction bar just smokes the concrete and it's fucking makes the car come to a halt. Like I literally can't pull it in. So we're gonna have to back it up as much as possible so I have enough room between the door and the front of the car, and we're just gonna have to send it like that. Okay, now that that's off, let's go ahead and jack up the car so we can start draining this coolant, and hopefully I can catch most of it. Well boys, I'm actually catching most of it. It's actually not coming out too bad, and thank God that this coolant doesn't stain the floor, so we should be good. Alright boys, coolant is drained now. Now the 2 sensors I'm replacing today is this one, which is the engine coolant temp sensor right there. And then it's going to be hard for you guys to see, but that sensor that's right back there, way tucked away in the way of everything, that's another one we're replacing. And the main one that got me to replace all of these, you guys really can't see it, but the thermostat is right down in there, and there is a sensor on the thermostat that we're going to be replacing, and that should be responsible for the fans not turning on, because when you disconnect that sensor and jump the plug that goes to the sensor, then the fans turn on no problem. So in theory, if I were to replace the thermostat sensor, then these fans should kick on by themselves. Who knows? We're gonna fuck around and find out. First things first, just to give us more access in the bay, I'm gonna go ahead and take out the overflow bottle. This charge pipe right here with the blow-off valve on it, we're just gonna disconnect the blow-off valve line, take this out, and then it's probably gonna be easier if I take off this top radiator hose to get to that one that's way tucked in there, and we should be mint. We came out on top, boys. After struggling for forever, I got the upper coolant hose off. We now have access to that one right there. I pulled the wire off it. It's this one. It's the single wire. So that one is responsible for transmitting the temp to your OEM cluster, the heat gauge on the cluster. That's what that skinny one in there is responsible for. This one with the clip on it tells the ECU how hot it's running. And then this one on the thermostat, that plug right there, my middle finger is pointing to, that one is responsible for telling your fans to turn on at a certain temperature. We also have a thermostat going in today, and hopefully that's not too big of a pain in the ass because we got to take care of that. But for now, let's see if I can get some extensions and swivels to work to get that sensor out. Now, has this sensor actually gone bad? I don't know, but we're here today to replace each and every last single sensor. So here's the unit that came out, probably hasn't been replaced in 30 years, and then here is the unit going in. Same length, same thread pitch, yada yada, but this one is a little bit bigger nut than this one is, so we're gonna go ahead and find that, reinstall these, gonna use a bit of thread sealant, and we're all set. Okay, just like I said, a little bit of Permatex thread sealant. Just a dollop. Just a dollop. Okay guys, one sensor done, one to go. There's that freshie in there. You can see the fresh brass right there. Now we're going to be moving on to this one right here. So what I'm going to do is just unplug the VTEC solenoid, give us a little bit more room, unplug that, and then hopefully get another socket on there to turn that one off, and all should be well. Okay boys, well I don't know why that back sensor had to be such a pain in the butt, because that one took a whole 30 seconds and it is replaced. Thread sealed, just cinched down. You don't want to go too hard. These are threads in the head, right? So you don't want to strip these out. So you just go like nice and snug, leave it. I got thread sealant on it, plugged it back in. There's a little bit of slack on the wires there. VTEC's plugged back in. The first sensor we did is all plugged in, hose is back on with the clamp. So this side, the two sensors in the head with the coolant hose or the radiator hose and all the sensors are now plugged back in. So everything as far as sensors on the head goes, we should be mint. Now let's move back to the thermostat, replace it with a 170 degree, which is 10 degrees colder than factory. And then we also have a new thermostat switch to go in as well. So one more sensor, one thermostat, we're Gucci. Boys, my Gates Racing 170 degree thermostat did not come with a gasket. However, this one looks to be in quite good condition. So I'm just gonna quickly swap the gasket over. Pretty sure this one's more than okay still. There's no rips, there's no cracks, there's no anything. That's crazy though, like why would it not come with a fresh gasket? I didn't even open the box and look at it because I just assumed all would be good. Last thing I thought was I'd need to buy a gasket. So I think we're good.
2,000 years later.
All right, boys, we have done it. A lot of struggle later, and it's super hard for you guys to see in there. Let me make it a little easier. We now have a new thermostat. Now I just need to hook the ground up again, put the new sensor in, and then hook the connector back up to the sensor. And I have the sensor right here ready to go, thread sealed and all. Boom, and just like that, all 3 coolant sensors are replaced and a thermostat. We got a 170-degree thermostat, we have a new thermo switch, we have a new sending unit to the gauge switch, and we have a new engine coolant temp switch that sends the temp to the ECU. We should be fucking mint, boys. I'm just gonna go ahead and quickly button everything back up off camera, double check all my work, and then once we fill it up and start bleeding the coolant and fire this thing up, we'll pick it back up, check for leaks, fingers crossed, hope we're good, and we'll see you then. Well, boys, when I was buttoning up the car, everything's good to go now, except I just got to put the charge pipe and hook the blow-off valve back up. This is my fan hot wiring right here, so we have an inline fuse to the battery, and then this runs off to the gauge and it's grounded. But my horn was just dangling here. I've got my 2 fan wires right here, and then I've got the OEM fan wires right here. So I'm going to connect those today, and hopefully the new thermostat switch works. But when we did the turbo kit, the intercooler piping and intercooler took over the spot of where we had our horn, and I was like, dang dude, I really got to move that. I got to run it somewhere else because like it can't just be sitting here. So I found a cheeky little spot right underneath the car, right there. Doesn't hit the intercooler pipe, lots of room for flex, and it works perfect. So that's sick. We got the horn figured out. Now what I'm going to do is wire in the stock fan wires to the E-fan wires, hook up the charge pipe with the blow-off valve, drop it down, fire it up, bleed the coolant, check for leaks, yada yada, but we're getting there, and I'm really pumped with that little sneaky horn spot I found because it's nice and tucked away. You don't notice much in the bay. Coming out sick, boys. Okay boys, the oil pan is fixed. We have all 3 new coolant temp sensors, the sender to the gauge, the thermo switch, and the ECT coolant temp sensor. And we have a 10-degree colder thermostat in there, a Gates Racing 170-degree thermostat. As you can see, it is all filled up and ready to be bled. I do have the overflow on as well. And here's just a quick little overview before we start it. So there's the ECT sensor, and in there is the gauge sending unit. Right over here is the thermo switch with a new thermostat installed. All lines, hoses are back on. Hose clamps are on, everything that I took off. Hot wire fan switch is taped up and tucked away. Fans are just butt connected to the OEM wiring. So hopefully now that we have a new thermo switch and thermostat, the fans will turn themselves on when the car gets to temp. Charge pipe is back on, blow off valve is hooked up. All that we have left to do is fire this thing up, bleed the coolant, and hope for the best. Here we go, boys. Suppose hooking up the battery might allow it to start better. Idiot. There we go. Car is idling, bleeding the coolant, running good. I don't know why it took 2 times to start. That never happens. I really got to get this thing tuned. It's not liking whatever's going on here. Okay, this is what's confusing me. Everything's hooked up, fans wired in, and it's at 195 and the fans still haven't kicked on yet. If you go to parameters, fan override is supposed to turn on at 175 if the vehicle is under 68 kilometers an hour. Whoops, we are literally at 195 and the fans still aren't on. Like, I know that the wiring's good because when you jump that thermostat switch, the fans turn on. But I mean, the thermo switch that I just put in is still not turning the fans on, and yes, they are wired right, and yes, the wiring is fine because when you jump that switch, they turn on. Okay, fellows, well, I hate to be the Debbie Downer, but replaced all 3 coolant sensors on this car, thermo switch, sender to gauge, and the engine coolant temp sensor. And I put a 10-degree colder thermostat, and 10-degree colder thermostat is legit. That's working awesome. Now my water temp gauge that I added, my aftermarket gauge, isn't reading. Didn't touch any of that circuit today. Don't know why. And now I have put the fans back on my hot wire switch that went to the battery with an inline fuse, yada yada, not a relay. Should be on a relay, you get the deal. Because when I wired it up to the OEM Honda fan wiring, the fans will not turn on. I set in Honda, I left it at what my tuner set it at, which was 188. It got to 195 and they didn't turn on. Then I put it at 170 to match when the thermostat opens, and they still didn't turn on. It got up to a total of 202 degrees Fahrenheit today on Honda straight off the laptop, and the fans didn't turn on. So I quickly shut it off, took off the butt connectors, wired them to my switch, turned on the fan, and what do you know, from about 199 degrees once I fired it back up, all the way back down to about 180, 178 within 2 minutes. So the fan shreds, the fan works, but it will not turn itself on with the OEM wiring, even though I've just replaced everything. And yes, I can confirm that the wiring itself is fine. There's not a short, there's not a cut in the wire, because when you take that thermostat switch, the connector that plugs into it, off, and you jump it with a wire, the fans turn on, which means the wiring in the circuit is good. So I figured, hey, it's probably the thermostat switch, because that's the only other thing that controls it. Put a brand new one in today amongst the other two that I did. Guess what? Still don't turn on. So I hate to end the video like this. I did a whole lot of work. I wasted a whole day. I wasted about $100 for all the sensors and the thermostat to get absolutely nowhere. The only effective thing I did today was replace the goddamn thermostat. Oh, I really hate making videos like this and ending it with basically zero outcome for all that work, all that time. If you guys have any comments for me, please leave them down below. I know this is a common issue with Hondas. What do I check for next? What do I do? The circuit is good. The wiring is good. It's not cut. It's not spliced. It's not shorting. And when you jump it, it works. Replace the sensor and it still doesn't work. If you guys got anything for me, leave it in the comments below. But for now, I'm just going to have to ditch the hot wire, put a relay in place like proper, and run the fan off a switch still so I can get this thing tuned. Now that the oil pan doesn't leak, the coolant's rebled and doesn't leak, we just have to do injectors, map sensor, two-step coulter spark plugs, and fuel pump. All 4 of those parts I already have, just need to get installed. Then we can call up the tuner and get this thing tuned. But fan, OEM, turning itself on, why doesn't it work? I don't know. You tell me, please. Till next time, boys, comment, like, subscribe. I'll see you later. Peace.